Once upon a time, there was a society that invented an expression called corporate social responsibility. This was in a time that most companies behaved very irresponsible, because there was a presumption that the influence that companies could have on society, on the planet, was so minute that it was not really something to worry about. But as you all know, much more than my generation, I'm not 25 anymore, you do realize that we as humankind do have a severe impact on the planet. We are no more with a couple of millions. We are already toppling 7 billion people. You know the statistics. It lasted a long time, maybe 1 million years, for mankind to reach the first billion. This was in 1800. And it took only another century to have us multiplied to the number of 2 billion. And then in 1950, we had the 3rd million, and now we are already at 7-point-something billion. And we're not finished yet as mankind. Moreover, of course, as you know, we have been using much more energy per person. And of course, 7 billion times more energy is a lot of energy, and raw materials and space. So we are like a plague as a species. There's a famous Dutch biologist who wrote a very nice little booklet. If you go on the train and catch your plane at Schiphol, you'll have finished it by then. And it's called The Exploded Ape. And he just looks at mankind as a species from a biology point of view. And he says, if we do not change, we will be changed. And not gradually, because something like that doesn't happen in nature very often. You know, the very famous tale of the 29th day. If you have a small species, a herb, that's growing in lakes in Africa, which occupies only a very small piece because there's only one plant, and then it doubles the next day, and then the next day you have 4. The 28th day, it will have covered half of the lake. And the 29th day, it will be covered completely. And then the whole system collapses. So nature does not do things gradually. I mean, you have an earthquake, and a second before there wasn't an earthquake. Tsunami, it announces it a little bit before, maybe 1 hour in advance, but you cannot really prepare for that. So sometimes very sudden changes happen, and as humans we are very unapt to be able to cope with that. We still have our small brains that used to be adapted to situations where we had to fly lions, to flee for lions and things like that. But we are very hardly any. So how to say that? We're hardly wired for long-term, big-time changes, and that's exactly the challenge that we face right now. The advantage, of course, is now that we know much more than future generations. And we all have a cell phone, a mobile phone, and the technology in there, the calculating power in there, is thousands of times more than the combined computer systems that Houston had to put the first man on the moon and get him back safely again, which was an even more challenging endeavor, but they did it. Just imagine, thousands of times more calculating power in your device than was necessary and to make that achievement. By the way, sometimes I've mentioned it before, but when in Houston, in the control room, people cheered when it was really happening that the first man set foot on the moon. That was in August 1969. I can very well recall that because it was a really huge achievement of mankind. Someone calculated later on that the average age of people in that room, the people that actually achieved this this great thing was 26.2 years. And the announcement of President Kennedy in '61, that he announced the race to the moon, which required technology, which was not even there. He said, we're not going to do that because it's easy. We're going to do it because it's very hard. We have to really make some big leaps in technological advancement. This means that most people, by far the most people, but it was because there were also some older people in the room, by far the most people in that room that accomplished that thing were still in high school when he made that announcement. So as mankind, when we are faced with really big opportunities or challenges or problems, whatever you call them, we really can do that. And we are before such a big thing. There was an expression that was probably before the financial crisis, but that said, as safe as the Bank of England. I think it derived from the time that England was the world superpower and that England was financing that, as safe as the Bank of England. Last week, the director of the Bank of England announced that he advised, actually, shareholders of fossil fuel companies or electricity power generating companies which use fossil fuels better should think twice about the investments in the mid-term future. Just imagine what that means. Goldman Sachs, which is not a friend of the earth, where I used to live a long time ago, where I used to work a long time ago, he announced that coal is in a mortal decline. We are really seeing big changes. The president of the Dutch central bank, Nederlandse Bank, the day before yesterday, also said that he was in accordance with the director of the Bank of England. So there is a kind of communist opinion growing very rapidly. Also USO, also OPEC, also IEA, International Energy Agency, not known for their leftist inclinations. They say we are really before a huge challenge and we should prepare for drastic action on a large scale. We'll have the Paris climate talks in December, as you know. I was there at the last big one in Copenhagen, 2009. There's a completely different atmosphere at the moment, fortunately. What will happen there is very decisive for at least your generation, but I also think for my generation also already. But even when all the countries achieve all of their commitments that they have submitted before the 1st of October, even when they will achieve all of their commitments for the full 100%, we will still be heading for a general global temperature increase of about 3.1 to 3.3 degrees centigrade. Just imagine. Again, if all countries will achieve all their commitments for the full 100%, we will still be heading for 3.1 to 3.3 degrees centigrade. In Copenhagen, I just mentioned, we agreed as mankind, there's a lot of hubris in that, because it seems like if we can decide upon the law of gravity, that's another kind of law than the kind of laws that Parliament passes. We do like it is a law that we can pass in Parliament, because we determined as mankind that we should not pass the 2% degree. Because it was calculated by scientists that if we do that, that there is a 50-50% chance that things will run out of hand big time. So just imagine, you are the director of a big company, and you ask your policy department, design a new plan for the next 10 years, and the department comes back with a grand plan, and they say, the chance that our company will still be here in 10 years is 50-50%. I think you would say, do your homework all over again, because that's not Russian roulette, because Russian roulette is with 6 chambers and 1 bullet. This is 2 chambers with 1 bullet. But this is the stated official goal that 200 governments in 2009 decided upon as the goal that we should strive towards. That's your future. Just imagine, 50-50. That's 2%. We're not there. We're heading for 3.1 to 3.3%, if everything goes right. International Energy Agency 1.5 years ago announced that if things are going not very, very different from how they're going right now, we're heading for 5.2 degrees. Well, one of the things I also do is publish books. Since I found out that no one in the Netherlands was willing to publish Al Gore's book, then I took a second mortgage on my house. I really did. I sold a lot of them, so don't you worry. Because after the whole thing started, people really got interested. But then I said, well, if I come across a book that I find really interesting and nobody's going to publish it, I'm going to do it myself. It's a very nice hobby, I can tell you. And one of the books that I published was by Mark Linus. And he is an acclaimed, prize-winning science editor and journalist. And he published a book a couple of years ago. It's called 6 Degrees. And he went through all scientific literature to determine what would happen globally in the specific regions of the world when the global average temperature rise was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees. You can read it, what's happening. I mean, it's already, how do you say that? Science that's 6 years, 7 years old. And we know a lot more, and things are not looking much more rosy than they did at that time. On the contrary. But even if you look into that, 2 degrees is very unpleasant. I mean, I don't know what you've seen about the 8 o'clock news last Sunday, what was happening with a little downpour in the south of France. I don't know if you know what's happening with the drought in California and the huge fires in Indonesia where people cannot breathe, or the same thing in Alaska. Weather events can never be, how do you say that, named climate events, of course, and they never will be, not in 100,000 years. But the whole pattern is getting clearer and clearer, and it really fits into what has been predicted already a long time ago. And again, it's not pleasant. You know that, and we are only at 0.9 degrees average global temperature rise. And again, I said, things sometimes do not change gradually. They might change very rapidly. I don't have the time to go into detail much more about that, but if you really get into the superficial literature that gives you an overview of what's happening, maybe you should do that once in a while. It's not looking very pleasant. So far, the gloomy part of my lecture. I know it's all very nice, because as Ad said, I started some time ago. Thank you. Yeah, some time ago with my first company, MGMC, which was consulting governments and companies and NGOs also, because it was in 1982. I thought, after having worked with Friends of the Earth, it was time that there should be a discussion amongst those 3 parties, because at that time they were only firing shots at each other. They were fighting instead of cooperating. And of course, it's very important that organizations like Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, etc., that they point out what's going wrong, and that they can do so very vigorously sometimes. But in the end, it's companies that have to make the change themselves. And then governments come in and they regulate all that. And that's the division of labor in that respect, I think. So at some point, especially in the Netherlands, we're a very small country and we have to talk to each other. It's necessary to come together and come to an agreement on what we should do. And that was not happening at the time, so I thought I step out of that equation. I leave Friends of the Earth and I try to be an intermediary, postillon d'amour, between the three of them. So I work for all 3 kinds of parties. And one of the things I did over 25 years ago was write the first draft of the Dutch intermediate, integrated environmental policy plan. That was the first one of its kind at that time. It was very advanced. At that point, we thought we had already accomplished it, but it was just a plan, a piece of paper. Quite some things have been accomplished in terms of waste, for example, and other goals that we achieved. But in energy, we have failed very much, I think. We had a new policy plan every year, so investors didn't want to invest in such an insecure environment. So I'm ashamed to say that we are just within the European Union, just above the island of Malta, with regard to renewable energy. I think and I hope that we are gathering pace to make big strides towards renewable energy production in the Netherlands for the next coming years. I think so. And I do a little thing too. Atte did a huge effort to stimulate that. That had a huge impact. Sometimes it takes years for that to become visible, but that's what he did. I also tried to play my little part. But as I was seeing that things were not moving fast enough, I thought maybe I should try and do something myself, and not in the first world, developed world, but in the world where there is energy poverty on a scale which we just can hardly imagine. Sometimes I wonder how Africa and Asia can have an economy at all if you are hardly connected to a power grid, and if you're connected very often for 5 minutes or for 5 days, the power is off. How can you ever have an economy running without power? I mean, that's the first starting point. In 2010, I visited the World Cup football in South Africa. It was the first time that FIFA, this renowned organization, granted the right to the South, to Africa as a continent, to organize the football world championships. And of course, as a responsible organization, they required actually from the candidate, in this case South Africa, that it would be the first carbon neutral World Cup, at their expense, of course. And since South Africa already had some trouble finishing the stadiums in time, they just forgot about the CO2. And then a couple of months before that, they said, well, we have to do something. We either have to buy carbon credits, and it was 2.8 million tons. I never knew before Copenhagen, when they put a big balloon there, and it said, this is one ton of CO2. I think this whole room would be one and a half ton. So say 1.5 million times this room is the CO2 output of a couple of matches of football in South Africa. So that's quite a big amount. And the carbon price at that time, carbon credit, was 15 euro. So that easy calculation, 40 million euro for just a tick in the box. They just did not want to spend that money. So what they came up with is a nice contest, and they asked everybody in the whole world, because it affects us all, who would come up with a plan which would cost no money and would solve the problem. And then you would be FIFA Green Goal Partner. That's something to die for, I think. So my business partner, Camille Vergessen, and I, we just had the crazy idea to go there to South Africa, to take on that challenge, because we like challenges. We went there, but after a week we had to conclude that we didn't have a solution to the problem. So sombering over a beer, we just looked up, and it occurred to us that a lot of lamps in South Africa were still incandescent lamps. And you know, as engineers, it has took the heating industry a long time to produce a device which was 90% efficient in producing heat from primary energy. But of course, the incandescent lamp did that all along, already for 100 years, since 90% is turned into heat and only 10% into light, whereas it's a lighting device, of course. With LED lights, that's completely the opposite. So we made a quick calculation. If you would replace a 100-watt lamp for an 8-watt LED lamp, And you know, an incandescent lamp has a lifetime of 1,000 hours, and an LED lamp of 25 to 50,000 hours. Easily to calculate how many incandescent lamps you would have to replace for an LED light. Problem solved. But there was a slight problem, finances. At that time, I know the numbers from the Netherlands, one 8-watt LED bulb or light would cost 25 euros. So the most stolen articles in the supermarket, so next to the cigarettes and the condoms, they were at the cashier, so that it wouldn't be stolen. And in South Africa, where we were, 25 euros for some people is a month's salary. So they would not do that. So we designed a scheme that we could have the carbon credits beforehand. We would sell them to a carbon trader, go with that signature to a bank, get the money, and pre-finance the LED lights for people in South Africa. Very clever. So in front of you is a FIFA Green Goal partner. Thank you. But we discovered that even in South Africa, most advanced economy in Africa, 25%, a quarter of the population, is not connected to the grid at all. So even if we would have had them handed out for free, these people couldn't do anything with it. Maybe sell them. So I thought, how on earth, after 6:30 p.m., darkness falls very rapidly below the equator, how do they live? How do they have their social life, their economic life, etc., etc.? And then I discovered what I call the horrors of kerosene. You know, kerosene is, of course, the fuel that's used in airplanes. So it's the glamorous world. But the kind of kerosene from distillation that's left, that can be sold to really poor people, is a kind of toxic fluid that they just burn and they ruin their health. It's very dangerous because if you have a pot of tea and it spills over you, you have bad burns. But if you spill burning kerosene on yourself in an environment where the whole built environment is dry wood or reed or whatever, you're on fire. And there's no water and there's no medical facilities. So either you die or you have to live on with all the scars that will maim you for life, but that will also very much hurt you for life. And I looked into the numbers, and they were staggering. The World Health Organization had calculated that over 300,000 people every year die from fires from kerosene, burned to death. Last year, this year, next year, etc., on a regular basis. And these, sometimes, if I'm cynical, I say these people are so lucky as to die from the fire. Because if you have to live on, you will always have these pains. You will never find a husband again, a job, you just can forget about it. You know how many people this affects every year? 6 million. Imagine, 6 million regularly. I thought, how can this be? How can this be in continents where there's sun abundant? Why don't they harvest the sun, store it, use it in the form of light and power after sunset? Safety for women, children, economic development, I discovered, I really dug into the numbers, that the poorest people on earth spend $30 to $38 billion every year on buying kerosene to destroy themselves, actually. But they have no other choice because there's no devices that are both efficient and affordable. I thought, I'm a political scientist by training, so I know nothing. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I know nothing about something really in depth, like you do. But what I do know is to find the people that have that knowledge and to combine them and make them into a team that can really accomplish something. So that's exactly what we did, Camille Veressel and me. So we thought, why does not Philips or General Electric or Sylvania or Osram, the big four in light and power in the world, why haven't they developed it for people that really dearly need it? So we thought, how can we do that? I mean, how can we design a beautiful because you should be proud of something. If you go into a shanty town or a favela or a poor people's neighborhood and go into a shop, what you see is rubbish. You can just see it is worthless. It will break down in a week or a month, and people have to buy all over again, spend the money, and in the end up paying much more than if you would had been able to buy a decent device in the first place. So that's a circle of poverty that keeps on being in existence for forever. So we thought we should have a beautiful design. People should be very proud of it. So we hired someone from Delft, industrial design, very good quality here. We also had people that were really in-depth knowledge, which had in-depth knowledge about solar PV, about batteries, about LED lamps. And we combined it. And within 9 months after the decision, I mean, I was in consulting. I was in communication consulting, policy consulting. And then I just imagine, it's a stupid idea to design a lamp that you would then try to sell in the most difficult countries, in Chad, in Malawi, in Sierra Leone, etc., where the need is. So later on, I concluded that I must have been a little bit crazy, but even so, within 9 months, we designed a device that we then sent to TNO and to Fraunhofer Institute to test it. And they first sent it back because they couldn't believe the results, because it was twice as efficient as anything that had been produced before. How can that be? I really wondered myself, how can that be? Why did the others? Why were the others not capable or willing to do that before us? And then, of course, we had the big challenge to market it and to send it all over the world. We had a crowdfunding campaign. It was in the 2012, I think, before the big surge of crowdfunding, and we did that both on a Dutch platform and on an American platform called Kickstarter. Maybe you know it. And it was a success. So we said, we are going to produce this. We had a prototype produced, one prototype. We said, we are going to produce this, and if you buy it from us now, and you pay for it, with that money we're going to produce it. And we promise that we're going to send it to you within half a year. 12,000 people did that. I thank them still very, very much. But to reward them for their confidence, we said, because it was at that time 3 years after the horrendous earthquake in Haiti, and at that time there were still 370,000 people homeless in tents. Just imagine, we are here, 2 seconds, the roof falls down, half of us dead, all of us have lost our homes and our income and everything, and after 3 years you're still in a tent without any facilities. Just imagine. So we said, we are going to give those people as well such a device. We're not going to make any profit, but just to get started, we want to reward you for having confidence in us and sending us the money before, and not knowing us, and not knowing whether you get your money back at all. 12,000 people. So we did that. And then an American, because Kickstarter is also America, he said, well, I like the idea, I like the device. Why can't I sell it in the United States for you? Can I be your representative? And we'd never thought about that because we wanted to solve a problem in the South. But then within 3 days, he sent a business plan. And we thought, well, this is a guy that knows his stuff. It was a business plan. We didn't even have a business plan. So we copied it. And he was our representative. And he started to sell big time. And then we thought, well, the United States can pay much more than Malawi. Why not devise a scheme like, I coined it a Robin Hood pricing model, whereas the United States would pay much more, in the Netherlands, in order to give us some more leeway, some more money, to subsidize the price in the countries that really need it. So that's what we've been doing. And apart from that, we said, we're going to make it visible in the form of a buy one, give one model. And it's not like Tom's shoes, then you can have very posh, expensive shoes, and you give away some sandals. I mean, that's a little bit cheap. So we said exactly the same thing. This was psychologically the right thing to do, I think, exactly the same device to people that don't have money at all. So we said we only give it away for free if there's a real acute emergency. Because otherwise, like in Haiti, people had to earn something. I mean, they were sitting there in their plastic tent, but they were just doing nothing. They were forced to do nothing. Why not plant trees? That's a big problem in Haiti. Why not repair roads? Why not teach children? I mean, you can have dignity for yourself. You earn it. You're more proud of it. You take care of it, and you can have the benefits of solar light instead of kerosene. And I went there, and people immediately asked, "Oh, well, so there's power in there. There's electricity that gives the LEDs the power to shine bright. Why don't you have a plug where we can put our cell phones in?" Cell phones, poor people. I can explain, you know that already, so I won't, how important mobile phones are, even small Nokias, for people. So we thought we should design that as well. And we did the same thing, crowdfunding, give it to people, etc. So we said we are not giving it away for free, only in acute emergency situations, because then we have to help. And we did so in Haiyan, in the typhoon in the Philippines. We sent tens of thousands to Ebola medics in Sierra Leone. Just imagine, it's 6 p.m. and the doctor has to say to his patient, "I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore. I'm coming back again in 10 hours. I hope you're still alive." I mean, horrendous. So we helped there. We helped in Nepal, of course, Vanuatu. There's Syrian refugee camps, tens of thousands. So we helped where we could, and we tried to connect the market, which has become a market, the market in the West and the market in third world countries. Also to have people think about the concept of energy poverty and the possibility of Africa and Asia to just skip a century. I mean, they skipped a century with telephones. They don't have landlines in Africa or Asia. They just use a mobile phone. And in the United States, people still write checks. In Africa, in a couple of seconds, they have transferred the money with a mobile phone. They're much more advanced than we are in that respect. So they can and they should do, in my view, the same thing with power at large and with light. There are no landlines necessary. There is no grid necessary. So that's why we designed in Rwanda, that's why we designed in Rwanda what we call a virtual grid. Because people are connected to the power grid, to the sun, and it doesn't require any wires. You just have to collect it and to store it very efficiently and then use it. So the design, that's the case with all renewables, wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, etc. The first investment is big, and then you never have fuel cost. So it's a matter of pre-financing. And that exactly is the big problem for poor people. They cannot just afford it. They can't go to a bank to get a loan for that. So what we did is we, as a kind of a bank, we handed out for a quarter of the cost price, and then people pay it off on a weekly basis by buying scratch cards, which you are used to anyway with mobile phones. They pay a couple of 70 cents a week, which is a price which is lower than what they pay now for kerosene or candles or batteries. So they have access, and it's cheaper. So at some point, after a number of months, they have paid off the device completely, and then it says, there's a LED screen, it says, in Swahili, of course, congratulations, it's free for you to use now. You don't have any cost anymore. And they can use it for many years, because it's a very sturdy design. It's Africa-proof. You can just drop it on the ground. Don't try this at home, but you can do that. Sometime someone dropped it by incident from a 4-story hard building, and it wasn't broken. So he sent it to me because I wanted to have it in the Waka Waka museum. And it was still working, and it got lost because it didn't resemble, I couldn't see any scratch. I mean, it's crazy, but it was really the case. So I probably have sold it to someone else, but it still works because we didn't have it back. So what we did is, in a very short period of time, I have to conclude, a very short period of time, without any knowledge of the whole field, without any money, we designed a real good device, which is very much in demand. We distributed already, I think, about 750,000 devices. That's a lot. I mean, indeed, we are about the number 5 in the world, which says two things. That we did something good, but we're also a very minute company still, because there's a huge market. There's 1.2 billion people without power at large, and there's another 1.2 billion people with blackouts, brownouts all the time. So that's over a quarter to a third of world population. That's quite a market. So we have to grow very, very rapidly. We are doing that right now. I mean, we're doubling for the last 3 years. And you know, the 28th day, think about the pond. Half the pond was covered, and the 29th day it was completely covered. So I think we can, together with other companies that now come in producing the same kind of thing, in a situation that we can, I think, within 10 years, enlighten and empower Africa and Asia, and it will mean a big change also for the world economy, because all these people are becoming more productive. It will include them in the world community at large. It will mean safety for people, children, women, etc. The economy will grow, etc. The last thing I want to say is, you live. That's how I started, in a very challenging time. We are the first generation to experience the effects of climate change, and we are the last generation that can do something about it, because otherwise it will completely run out of hand and it will be a complete chaos. So we have to do that, and we have to do it very, very rapidly. Our carbon budget, what we can still use, is about 15 to 20 years, let it be 25, and then we will have to change completely to renewables. It's up to you and your power, your endurance, your intelligence to do that, so we count on you. Thank you very much.